House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 7 is called Driftmark, which is the largest island in Blackwater Bay and the seat of House Velaryon, the second most powerful family in the kingdom, the naval power of the Seven Kingdoms, and the family which has intermarried with the Targaryens over multiple generations. It's also the location of most of the scenes in the episode. Driftmark might be my favourite episode in both seasons of House of the Dragon so far. It's tense, it's got something for every faction, and despite being mostly talk, it advances the plot in significant ways. We begin with a funeral for Laena Velaryon, Daemon's wife and Corlys's daughter. She died last episode in Pentos, and in her death, Daemon has done what she wanted to do in life, brought their daughters back to Driftmark. Her funeral has actually brought all of the royal family together, the Velaryons, Viserys and the Greens, Rhaenyra and the Blacks, all in the same space to watch Laena's beautiful coffin with her carved effigy get sent into the sea. All the main players, everyone relevant to the succession, are stuck together in this small space while their dragons fly around above them. I think I saw Seasmoke, Sunfire, Maelys, Caraxes and possibly Vhagar as well. So this is a chance for them to interact and see how things are going. It's full of shots of people coyly eyeing each other up before going ahead and initiating contact. This scene is about 25% of the episode, and explaining it in a linear way feels too confusing, so I'll go through by faction, at least as much as I can, and I'll start with the Velaryons, as it's a Velaryon they're mourning, and a Velaryon who's doing the talking. Specifically, Aemond, Corlys's brother, giving a eulogy to his niece in Velaryon, talking about their family blood. Ours runs true. Ours must never thin. Different people have different reactions to this. Daemon giggles. Rhaenyra holds her children closer, seeming to feel personally attacked, and Viserys looks at Rhaenyra with concern in his face. Aemond is speaking in a tone that could be interpreted as a man trying to hold in his grief, or equally could be the resentment at Rhaenyra that his words imply, because it's clear that Rhaenyra's husband, Laenor, Aemond's nephew, is not in a good place. The pressures he has been under as Rhaenyra's husband, combined with the death of his sister, seem to have broken him. Laenor can't stand the post-funeral chat, and is standing in the shallows looking mournfully out to the sea. Corlys seems embarrassed by this, and orders one of Laenor's particularly close friends to go and get him. Corlys in this episode shows how concerned he is with image and legacy. At the funeral, we also see him talk with Viserys, Rhaenyra's second son, and allegedly his grandson. Viserys will be Lord of Driftmark, but Luke doesn't care, because if he is Lord of Driftmark, that means everyone is dead. Rhaenys, in contrast, is focused on her granddaughters, Laena's children, and how they feel right now. The husband and wife have a fundamentally different view of current events, and they will discuss this later in the evening. Rhaenys wants Driftmark to go to their eldest granddaughter through Laena's claim. Corlys wants it to go through Laenor to Viserys, even though they both know and speak out loud that these children are not Laenor's children. History remembers names, is Corlys's attitude. So that's the Velaryons. Let's have a quick look at Viserys. The poor guy doesn't get much to do. He's plainly desperate to talk to his brother, but Daemon is brooding for most of the funeral, standing against a wall alone and waiting for the others to approach him, like he's some kind of mafia don, which I guess he is. Viserys eventually goes over and consoles his brother, commiserating that his daughters look like his wife. I guess this is how Viserys feels about Rhaenyra and Aemma. The gods can be cruel, Viserys says. They've been particularly cruel to you, Daemon replies. The disease, the pressures of the kingship, his connection to the High Towers. Daemon doesn't specify what he means, but Viserys ignores the insult and invites Daemon to King's Landing. The invitation is turned down. Viserys decides to call it a night and announces his decision to go to bed, calling Alicent Aemma. Viserys doesn't notice what he says, but Alicent and Criston Cole hear it clearly, and they're shocked. But the look on their face is more sympathy than disappointment. Viserys feels like a man with not much future. Rhaenyra is obviously very concerned about the future, and at the funeral is eyeing up Daemon to be a part of that as he broods alone against his wall. She seems to want to delay that meeting and speaks to her eldest son Jace. Jace is learning what it means to be a member of the royal family, i.e. he is completely miserable. Last episode he asked Rhaenyra if he was Harwin Strong's son. and here he tells his mother he should be in Harrenhal mourning Harwin. Rhaenyra snaps him out of the fantasy. Jace can't afford to act on this or even talk about it when Alicent is watching, and tells Jace to go and console his cousins, both because it's the right thing to do and because they're Velaryons. Jace is a winner at this, with one of the daughters grabbing his hand. Rhaenyra, like her father, eventually works up the courage to go and talk to Daemon, which culminates in them taking a moonlight walk on the beach and opening negotiations to a personal and political alliance. They talk about the other men in Rhaenyra's life, Harwin's devotion to her and how Laenor is no longer useful, as presumably now Harwin is dead, she feels the fiction of her marriage doesn't need to be maintained. There's no more children coming from that source. They discuss Harrenhal's curse, and Daemon suggests that the Hightowers would exploit that to remove Harwin and his father. To be fair, Daemon is not wrong. That is kind of what happened. Rhaenyra moves in to secure Daemon's allegiance. Look at what my life became without you. Is this a personal or a political regret? Is this a personal or political move that she makes next? She kisses him, despite some reluctance on his part, and they finish what they started in the brothel. All this is soundtracked to waves, inevitable waves, like the inevitability of this was just where and when and not if. And back to the funeral one last time. The Greens, the Hightowers. I've left them till last because it's Aemond, Alicent's second son, who causes the second big set-piece scene of the episode. At the funeral, we see Otto smoothing the pin against his chest, back in his old jobber's hand after a 10-year gap. Aegon and Aemond are watching their sister Helena, who seems completely self-absorbed. Dragons of flesh, she says, dragons of thread. Aegon is getting drunk while he talks with Aemond, despairing at how he will be marrying his sister in a few years. The younger brother says he wouldn't mind marrying her, he'd do his duty. Aemond is clearly disappointed with his older brother, his general attitude, his drinking. It's a disappointment that seems to be hardening into contempt. Meanwhile, Alicent and Cole continue their somewhat close relationship. Cole points out that Larys Strong is staring at her. Alicent decides to brush it off. At one point, Daemon brushes past Otto Hightower, and time has clearly done nothing to soften Daemon's hostility. No matter how fat the leech grows, it always wants another worm, he says. In the conflict between the Greens and the Blacks, Daemon's contempt for Otto, whatever the origin of that contempt might be, means the Greens are never an option, and his Velaryon marriage, combined with Rhaenyra now living in Dragonstone, kinda makes the Blacks a default choice for him, and that leads to their nighttime tryst. Winning Daemon to her side is a big prize for Rhaenyra, but it's not like Daemon thinks about it much. It's a pretty obvious set of incentives that sets him on this course. So like I say, the funeral scene is incredibly well written, so carefully interlinked that unpicking each character's part is difficult, but let's go back to the Greens. Otto clearly shares Aemond's growing contempt for Prince Aegon. Later in the evening, he finds Aegon drunk and half asleep. The Hand of the King is sufficiently annoyed, he actually kicks the prince and orders him to bed, watched by Aemond, whose face is without sympathy. Later that night, Aemond claims the dragon Vhagar, riderless since the death of Laena. Vhagar gives him a bit of a flying lesson, but Aemond manages to pass the test. When Aemond returns, Laena's daughters are shocked. The younger one, Rhaenyra, was hoping to claim her mother's dragon. Aemond points out that in that case, she should have actually claimed him. Jace and Viserys are there as well, and the children gang up on Aemond, who starts throwing out insults. Firstly at the parentage of Jace and Luke, which Luke doesn't understand. Then at Rhaenyra, saying that maybe your cousins can find you a pig to ride. That's a bit harsh and completely misdirected, as Baelor and Rhaenyra weren't even in Westeros when Aemond was humiliated in the dragon pit. They fight, and Luke puts a knife in Aemond's eye. He'll have to close an eye, Helena said last episode, and so it turns out she was making a prophecy. The Kingsguard come and break up the fight, wake up the adults, and we get the second big set piece of the episode, dealing with the fallout of the fight. It's not quite as long as the funeral, only about 10 minutes, but dials up the tension and anger much further. Viserys is forced to the forefront here, in contrast to the bit part he played in the funeral. Who had the watch, he wants to know, glaring at the king's guard, wondering how they allowed the children to be unsupervised for so long. Just after he speaks, there's a shot of Alicent, perhaps implying she knows who had the watch and why they weren't around to break things up sooner. A bit of a spoiler for Season 2 here, so be warned for the next 10 seconds or so. Perhaps this is a suggestion that Alicent and Cole are already having an affair. The Maester confirms to the room that Aemond's eye is lost. Alicent lashes out at Aegon, calling him a drunk, a fool, wondering why he wasn't around to protect his brother. Why is Aegon so pathetic? Hasn't Alicent been preparing him for the kingship? Beyond some praise from the Dragon Keepers about how he's great at handling Sunfire, he seems completely unimpressive, both to the viewer and to the characters. Has Viserys refused the appropriate training because of his preference for Rhaenyra? Has Alicent been too busy with Helena or with, shall we say, other things? Has he been overindulged by Alicent, who wants to protect him from Rhaenyra? I like the dynamic, the younger brother being the more competent one. It's an echo of Daemon and Viserys, at least in some ways. At least in Daemon's head, he might make that comparison that he's a more competent younger brother. Or maybe a better parallel might be Rhaenys and Viserys. But not explaining why Aegon is like this feels a bit frustrating. The children start squabbling again, and the adults just watch until Viserys is forced to take charge and shouts for silence. The king asks Aemond for the truth. Alicent and Rhaenyra shout at each other, and the kids say that they were called bastards. Aemond says he heard these accusations from Aegon, who, when questioned by Viserys, shows some real backbone for once. Asked where he heard that Rhaenyra's children are illegitimate, he says, "We know, father. Everyone knows. Just look at them." Viserys is stunned. He's got no answers for this, and like Vin Diesel in The Fast and the Furious, insists that we're family and the fighting must cease. Alicent isn't satisfied. She asks Cole to take one of Luke's eyes as payment. Cole refuses, explaining he's her protector, so he can't follow the order. In one of the many, many great pieces of silent acting in this episode, the Lord Commander looks visibly relieved that Cole refuses to escalate. Instead, it's Alicent who escalates things, stealing the dagger from Viserys' belt and lunging towards Rhaenyra. This time Cole acts, running towards the two women, but he's held back by Daemon as everyone watches in horror. The two mothers eventually break apart, Alicent slicing at Rhaenyra's arm with the knife, drawing blood that drips on the floor. It's an incredibly tense scene, all the build-up between Rhaenyra and Alicent, the horror of the onlookers when Alicent acts. And it's Aemond that breaks the tension. "It's okay, mother," he says. "I lost an eye, but gained a dragon." Viserys leaves, but everyone else stays, the two emerging factions looking at each other, and nothing has been resolved. And that's the main drama of this episode done with. The rest just confirms the results. We see Otto talk with his daughter, telling her she should apologise to Viserys and that he's proud of her. Viserys, being Viserys, doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Larys Strong, on the other hand, is the kind of man who's definitely willing to do something. He approaches Alicent and offers his services, particularly to make good on the request that Alicent made the previous night. He's using words like perversion, defiled, outraged. While he sounds like he means it, the anger doesn't reach his eyes. Alicent looks horrified and declines, but makes sure that Larys remains on friendly terms with her. Back on Driftmark, Rhaenyra has an awkward reunion with Laenor while she's getting her arm sewn up. She's getting tired of him, and later, as she watches the Greens sail away, tells Daemon it's him she needs. "I cannot face the Greens alone. I need you, uncle." She's thinking about how things will be in a post-Viserys world. She doesn't see any chance for reconciliation, and I think at this point that's fair enough. Daemon points out that if they're going to be together, Laenor needs to be permanently out of the picture. And so, with Laenor's agreement, they stage his death, realistically enough that both Corlys and Rhaenys believe it. A burned corpse. We don't know who. Just one more victim of the Game of Thrones. Laenor escapes for a life presumably in Essos. "The realm will whisper I did it," Rhaenyra says. but Daemon thinks that's a good thing, and that leaves the two of them free to marry. A Valyrian wedding seems to involve blood, but no fire, with the bride and groom dressed in grey and red. And that's House of the Dragon, Season 1, Episode 7. Daemon is firmly back in the Westerosi politics he had escaped, and the factions are more firmly divided than ever. Thanks for watching.